What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with my certified fantabulous co-host, Grant Hughes, who is just so unbelievably dedicated, as am I, that we have two live podcasts smack in the middle of the workday because we know that's what the masses want and have time to view. We're going to take a look back at the NBA trade deadline, which was exactly 1 month ago today. Happy 1 month anniversary to the NBA trade deadline. We're going to go through the biggest moves, regrade them or reanalyze them based off our initial thoughts. But first, the question everyone is dying to know the answer to. Grant, how the heck are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you for asking. You know what else today is? It's not just a month from the deadline, it's exactly a month until the end of the regular season. So what better, if you're into symmetry, what better time to look at these
That's
trades?
like kind of a nice, that wouldn't be called the bookend, whatever that is. It's the
I don't know what
symmetry.
it is.
Nice
It's right
yeah.
smack in the middle. That's good. That's perfect. This is the right time to do this, I think.
Does it feel like the time since the trade deadline has flown by or taken forever or both?
Flown by because the All-Star break was in there too. So
Yeah.
like, we talked, a few weeks ago about how that break was nice, but the weird thing is, like, I don't know how you feel about this, but for a lot of these trades, uh, it has felt like we're still kind of waiting to see, what the results are going to be. We just, like the Lakers, for example, and now we'll talk about it like with Durant. So we haven't gotten a lot of looks at, this team, this revamped team. What are, how different is it now, or how much better, or how much worse is it? So we have a lot of, like, I don't know, we still have a lot of a sample that we need to judge, and in some cases we're not going to get it. But that's another thing that makes, like, looking back at these trades interesting, is that we just, for some of them, it's like, I don't know, we still need to see way more to be sure.
Yeah, and we went through this for Bleacher Report too. So it's an exercise we have clearly thought a lot about at the moment. So I guess we should let's start with the Kevin Durant deal, which was, so do you want to take us through, since you led this one when we were regrading them, can you lead us through the Kevin Durant deal?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we need to go over the full trade, but I mean, everybody remembers basically it's Durant and TJ Warren to the Suns for Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson. What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4 unprotected firsts. They can't ever a whole bunch of firsts and some swaps. It's just like the most you could possibly give up, more or less. And now, as I was alluding to, Kevin Durant sprained his ankle in warmups on Wednesday night, and so there's, reporting is still early, but I've seen grade 2 ankle sprain. I've seen 4 to 6 weeks. I've seen maybe for the season. He was in a boot last night. We know that. So I don't know how you feel about that effect on the trade, or how it should change the way we evaluate it. Personally, I'm not really, and this is going to be inconsistent because there's going to be another trade where an injury is going to affect my analysis of it, but not so much in this case, because this was just always about the ceiling. And for me, just to go to the Suns grade first, it's just a flat A. Even if we've seen 3 games now of Durant, they were all awesome. Like, he just fit in perfectly, didn't take anything off the table. They were all big wins. I'm trying to, let me pull the stats up here. So his shooting lines, 23 points on 10 of 15 shooting, 20 points on 7 of 10, 37 on 12 of 17. It's like a joke, right? And those are all 3 wins. And so whatever questions you had about, and most people didn't, will Kevin Durant be difficult to integrate into a team? No, he will not. He is the most scalable superstar basically ever. So looked great, and all we care about is the ceiling, because we, at least I, and I think you to some degree, thought that this trade makes the Suns, on par with Denver or right there in the West. I haven't changed my opinion on that. The injury clouds it, but it's like, you're not going to say this was anything other than a home run. And then the other side of it, unless do you want, before I get to Bridges specifically in the Nets, how does the injury affect, if at all, your opinion on the Sun side of this?
It doesn't, because especially because we don't know the severity of it just yet. And also, even if he comes back, not until the playoffs, he's just shown that he'll come back from injury and dominate anyway.
Right.
So even if he missed the next, like, 3 weeks or whatever it was, they're going to be fine. I gave them an A- the first time around. And I think after seeing it on the floor, and just Devin Booker too, just absolutely thriving during the KD era, alongside KD, not just during the game that KD didn't play on Wednesday night. That made me feel even better about it. I gave them an A- initially because I'll just say, and I talked about this with the Timeline podcast, they didn't win. You got Kevin Durant, so you won, but they didn't win any aspect of the negotiation. It was, they didn't broker picks, swaps, And I get they were never getting out of it while keeping Mikal Bridges.
No.
Like they tried to sandwich DeAndre Ayton there instead. It wasn't going to work. So I understand that. But like then at the end, where Matt Ishbia was just like, yeah, we'll give you Jay Crowder because you all of a sudden said that you weren't going to trade us Kevin Durant because of Jay Crowder. I get that you were paying for the exclusivity of the window still, but you were a market of one and like just didn't win any aspects of the negotiation. So there was a little bit of new owner syndrome there to me. I don't know if you felt the same way, but again, you can't lose this trade. 11 times out of 10, I would still make it. It just would have been nice to see them like protect their flank a little bit.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think, and I mean, that ties into the Nets side of it. Bridges just, and like, look, he's not, so the one of the narratives with Bridges this season, and I'm not narrative in a negative way, like it's bullshit, but one of the real storylines for him was he was expanding his game. And that had to do with, Chris Paul was hurt, Devin Booker was hurt, Cam Johnson was hurt. So he was sort of just like the only guy left, of any, substantial star adjacent quality to do anything. And so he was running a couple more pick and rolls and he was getting a little more, into the self-creation bag on offense and just generally being on the ball more, just a little bit, nothing crazy. I mean, we talked about it. And then he gets to Brooklyn and suddenly it's like, oh my God, this guy, is he a frontline, first option star? The numbers. So it's just like a joke to look at these 26.5 points, 5.3 boards, 3.3 assists. His shooting split 52.6% from the field, 48.1 from deep, 92.2 from the line. Like that's all going to come down. There's just no one sustains that level of offensive efficiency on that kind of volume. But like what we thought was happening with Phoenix is really happening in Brooklyn. Like his usage rate was 19.2%. It's 27.3 now. 60.2% of his, that we kind of botched this, or I did on the actual write-up, but the gist is that like 15% more of his field goals are unassisted now. So he's not just dependent on, he's the 3-and-D label, like kind of done. I mean, he is that. He can be maybe the best 3-and-D player in the league, but he's so much more than that. And I really focus most of my analysis of this trade on him because I think in addition to all those picks and, Cam Johnson is not nothing and all that other stuff, just the fact that Bridges might be so much better than he showed himself to be in Phoenix. This is an A for the Nets. I went A's all around on this just because everybody got what they wanted. And I think the Nets maybe got more than they expected. So just the Bridges evolution really just puts this over the top for Brooklyn. You don't want to trade one of the best players of all time, but if you have to, this is a great way to ease the sting of that. And as you alluded to, like, there was nobody else really to run up this offer. It was just kind of like Durant wants to go to Phoenix. That's just what it is. It's not like the market was, forcing Phoenix's hand. You just got so much more than you should have been able to here.
Yeah, and the progression from Mikal Bridges, to echo what you said, yes, it was underway in Phoenix, but like this year, the thing you had written about, like his 2-point unassisted, like the share of his baskets that are going unassisted from 2-point range just skyrocketed. Just overall, looking at the progression from last year and even how stark it's been from Phoenix to Brooklyn, 18.1% of his buckets last season went unassisted. Then with the Suns this year, that was up to 28.8%. And now we're looking at about 40% of all his field goals going unassisted. That's a huge jump. And so just like if he maintains it, I don't know, I would bet against him being a 1A on a really good team.
Me too.
But like, were we ever talking about him as, maybe during our hotter takes, we said he could be the second best player in our championship team, but is he now maybe a 1B? Or is he a certifiable number 2? And the fact that this is just eminently on the table now, that's a big deal for Brooklyn, especially because he's under contract. They don't have their own picks. And so if they want to even see, like, if they want to keep their optionality open, you have Bridges to be like, oh, well, we could keep him. Or what would he command on the trade market this summer if you turned around and flipped him again?
Right. I mean, you heard the 4 firsts, right? There's whispered that's what they thought they could get for him shortly after they acquired him.
Would love to know if we're talking like real
right.
first. But yeah.
It can't be 4 firsts like they gave up to Phoenix. But like, I just think zooming out, what's happening with Bridges is a really good, because I think I kind of, downplayed, oh, he's doing more, he's capable of this. Because with Phoenix, his efficiency was down and he, as his volume and sort of responsibilities increased, I kind of thought like maybe he can be a little better, but I never foresaw this. And it's a good reminder that every once in a while, every player thinks they can do more. And not to say that Bridges was kind of clamoring for more responsibilities, but every once in a while you get this, which, and there's not a lot of them, like Jimmy Butler going from he's a nice role player to he's a good defender to he's a first option on a title threat for like the next 8 years. Every once in a while you get that kind of level up, and Bridges I think is much closer to that than the guy you can sort of incrementally give more responsibilities to. So it's a good reminder that you can't just dismiss guys putting up more volume or doing different stuff because the circumstances call for it, like they did in Phoenix. Sometimes it's real.
Yeah, and the thing I would just caution very quickly to wrap this up is Mikal Bridges has been spectacular, but the Nets are also in the bottom 5 of offensive efficiency since the Durant trade. Not all him; he hasn't even played. He wasn't eligible for the first game that they played without KD, but like still, that would be something to keep in mind. Is like, can he be the driving force, the number one on a top 10 offense? I don't know, but what he's showing now is incredible. We should probably hit the other side of this, which is the order we actually went in when we regraded it. So Kyrie Irving to Dallas, just to rehash the package. There, it was the Dallas Mavericks sent Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, a 2027 second, a 2029 first unprotected, and then a 2029 first to the Dallas Mavericks for Kyrie Irving and Markieff Morris, who I forgot to include in my initial write-up when I sent it. I just forgot that he sort of existed. I did not grade this the first time around. I graded all these trades except for the Kyrie one because it happened before the trade deadline. I can tell you unequivocally, based off the live show we did, I probably would have given them a D- or an F. I gave it a C the second time around, just because the same semblance of risk is there. And I don't know if you've already seen the video that he posted that's floating around there going off on how people watch him for 3 hours and think that they know him. And I find that video funny because it's further evidence of a disconnect from reality, because he specifically mentions, you're not considering the other 21 hours of my life. It is literally the other 21 hours of the day that concerns everyone with you. Everyone is at ease when they watch you on the basketball court for those 3 hours. That's when the opinion of yourself is at its highest. It's nadir. You're at your most radioactive off the basketball court. So please, I just talk about disconnective narcissism. Is that a thing? He's just mind blowing. So the risk is there because he said all the right things except for that post. But speaking of the media, since joining the Mavericks, he said all the right things. He hasn't wanted to talk about his future, and I think that's fine. That's his prerogative here. I think that he will wind up re-signing in Dallas, which is part of this grade, because you don't force your way out of Brooklyn unless you're concerned about a team having your bird rights. And Dallas now has the bird rights. They're pot committed because of what they gave up for him, and sort of just let him walk for nothing, or even trying to move him as part of a sign-in trade, which, well, what's the market for that going to be? Yeah, okay, the Lakers, but they've already traded one of their picks. And they can't, have LeBron, Anthony Davis, and Kyrie Irving on your payroll and be hard capped just feels super unrealistic. And so I'm caking in to see, it's like, okay, he'll probably be back. Do I feel good about that? I have no idea. But I will say, when you watch the Mavs, you can see the outline of a really good team that's just not finished yet, because Kyrie and Luka, the Mavs, are beating opponents by almost 10 points per 100 possessions with them on the court. Surprise, surprise, they can't get stops. Surprise, surprise, Jason Kidd doesn't want to play them with Christian Wood. Surprise, surprise, they're overly reliant on Josh Green and Reggie Bullock, and now just returned from injury, Maxi Kleba on the defensive end. Those are all, when you look at what they need with the trade assets they still have, because they can trade up to 2 first-round picks this summer still. You have the ability to go out and I think I get finishing touches, which in theory is what you need now. If you're counting on Kyrie Irving to be healthy and engaged, you just need finishing touches around him and Luka. I'm still wildly uncomfortable with this trade because I personally, and these are the lens through which we grade these trades, would not have tethered any part of Luka Doncic's competitive window to Kyrie Irving, who is just the anti-Semitism stuff, the being away from the Nets at different points, the way he submarine all these different locker rooms, just the thing that he said, how he can become a perpetual distraction just like that. The fact that the Mavs felt they needed to make this risk is an indictment on their situation. And I think that still holds. But again, I want to reiterate, even the games they've lost, like most with Kyrie and Luka Doncic, they've played some pretty high-end opponents for the most part. And they've had some bad losses too, but they've gone into crunch time. There's a high-level outcome for this team, and I'm just curious as to whether they'll be able to get the finishing touches around them. However, and the final thing here, and I'm just echoing this, is Kyrie going to stay? Are you fine being in the lucrative and long-term Kyrie Irving business? That is still very much up for debate. And people will get mad at a C if any Mavericks fans are listening to this. C is passing. They're passing. It's passing.
So I think so this is one of the trades that I haven't really, nothing that I've seen on the floor has changed my opinion of it, because as you said, with talking specifically about Kyrie, I didn't really have any questions about how this would work or how it would look in the actual games. Like I didn't think, we always kind of wring our hands about there's only one ball. How are Kyrie and Luka going to coexist? I didn't really ever see that as a a realistic thing to be concerned about. It's all the other stuff. It's the other 21 hours that, as you said, I think maybe we got to come up with some kind of like that needs to become a thing, that we're concerned about Kyrie Irving's 21 hours. But I just, as you were talking about it, I agree that he is likely to stay now. I think it's maybe feels more likely than it did. It was, call it a coin flip or whatever when the trade went down. Seems reasonably likely that he will resign. And I can't decide if I think that's better or worse than him leaving, free agency. And that's always been the concern for me, is I can't figure out which possible outcome makes me feel better about the trade. And that's just because if he leaves, that's rough, right? You gave up a first, you gave up, real players, Dorian Finney-Smith specifically, that helped you and helped you get to a conference finals, however you feel about that run last year. I think losing him, having given that up, would be bad. And I think the fallout with Luka being frustrated, like, so what was that all even for, is big. But if you consign or attach or tether, like you said, yourself to Kyrie Irving on a multi-year deal, you're just signing up for like God knows what. And unfortunately, if you had to guess what that ends up being, it would look a lot like it did with Brooklyn, where he's maybe not available, where he's acting in ways and saying things and doing things that just are not conducive to team success. They can be corrosive to team chemistry, and eventually it gets to the situation where he is looking to leave again. And then you're just over a barrel and no one will feel bad for you because this was so easy to see coming based on his track record. Like, I don't know which outcome I prefer, staying or leaving. So because it makes me so uncomfortable, I didn't grade this one, but it has to be like a D or an F, because I think it's just from the outset for me, the idea that Kyrie Irving is going to solve your problems is a flawed premise. It just, I don't know. I can't get there. So I understand that, you need top end talent, but I just have never found a way to feel good about Irving being on this team, with the stakes of, if this goes as bad as possible, Luka Doncic is the next superstar to ask to be traded. Like, that's not an unreasonable thing to suspect is possible. So that's a long way of saying I can't be in the Kyrie Irving business if I'm a team that has any real aspirations. How about the other side? It's a little cleaner, but what'd you do for Brooklyn here?
I gave them an A-. I wondered if, and very quickly to answer Brent in the chat saying, have no issue with Kyrie because he will be a free agent. Kai could still end up with the Lakers. I agree it could happen, but it has to happen with him taking a pay cut, because as I mentioned before, you can, I think, I haven't done the math, but like working under the hard, it would be Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, and a bunch of minimums. That's not bankable. We know all these guys are going to miss games at this point. So I'm not ruling out the Lakers, but it would take some pretty substantive financial concessions on Kyrie's part, which I just don't think that he's going to be willing to make given how he left Brooklyn, because it seems like he wanted his bird rights to transfer. As you mentioned, the net side of things, I gave him an A- here. I've wondered whether, because Kevin Durant was moved, should it have changed the calculus of what they targeted in a Kyrie Irving trade, of getting more future assets than they did? And I said, in theory, yes. But then I sat back and I asked, who was giving them more future assets? You got the equivalent at minimum of 2 first-round picks in the 2029 first and Dorian Finney-Smith at minimum. And it adds up to more than first-round equity, because you have Dinwiddie, you have those 2 seconds. And what other team was going to beat that offer? Maybe the Lakers. But if you're the Lakers and you knew that you could get D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, while getting rid of Russell Westbrook and only giving up 1 first-round pick, would you have preferred that to giving up 2 firsts and 2 swaps and maybe Austin Reeves for Kyrie Irving? I think there's even as much as LeBron wanted to play with Kyrie, there's a chance that they would have preferred the depth while maintaining some of their trade assets moving forward. But aside from them, that was it. Like, there was no team that was coming and beating this offer. And so I think the Nets did well in a situation that they absolutely contributed to. by handing the franchise over to Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, by not sort of taking a hard line stance sooner, by even when he was looking for other teams as part of a sign and trade, like them giving him that ultimatum or allowing him to have that search, and then the resolution being he's just coming back, but we don't want to extend him still. Like, they needed to have a more coherent opinion on the future of Kyrie Irving, and they failed to do that. So everything he did, there's also the stuff that they failed to do as well, but they still got great value here. And that Dallas Mavericks pick is not only unprotected, but it postdates Luka's current contract by at least 2 years. It's 2 years after his player option, so it's 3 years. That's almost maybe too far, because if Luka's going to agitate to get out, it's going to be at least maybe the year before his deal's actually up. And so you're giving the Mavericks time to rebound. But to get that pick so far off into the distance of a team that, even if Kyrie sticks around, he's going to be getting up there in age by that point. I think it was a solid bet to make, again, relative to a market that I honestly believe, and we have yet to hear differently, it was the Lakers and the Mavericks for Kyrie. And I buy the Suns' interest tangentially. Like, Devin Booker's so young. A 2029 Mavericks pick, to me, even though they have Luka, beats out a Suns pick in 2029 at this point. So I think under the circumstances, and I also just feel like Phoenix was kind of just playing galaxy brain negotiation, where it's, well, why would we give up any stuff for Kyrie Irving when we're going to be in the Kevin Durant sweepstakes once he's traded? So I can't fully buy Phoenix's interest to that extent, but I think this was Cam Johnson, or not Cam, Spencer Dinwiddie is not hitting threes anymore. Apparently only does that in Dallas. Dorian Finney-Smith is sub 27% from three in Brooklyn. So I factored that in. Those guys should normalize, but I think it was an A- for Brooklyn.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of I don't know if it's a conspiracy theory or it's just kind of like a diabolical approach by Brooklyn, but like, let's send in this saboteur and get that first round pick out in the future. Because if anyone can just completely destroy a franchise in the span of like several weeks, it's him. And so suddenly we're just adding to the potential value of that future first we have, even if it's way down the line. But like, there's a real possibility that Dallas is totally undone by this. And then suddenly that 29 first round pick is like, it's how we would have viewed some of those 27 and 29 Lakers picks, maybe even more so, because everyone assumes the Lakers can go get free agents, and Dallas basically has never done that. So, I mean,
they've tried at least.
They've tried. It's a fun angle. So I don't have a lot to add there. I think the Nets did great. Your B+ feels about right to me. I have the next one. This is the James Wiseman to Detroit super trade, which, as you noted in your initial write-up, is really two separate ones, but it involves the Hawks, Pistons, Warriors, and Blazers.
I think it became one, by the way. I'm not. Yeah, so I think it was reported as two separate ones, but I think it was folded into one just giant ass mega deal.
So that's how we're looking at it, and essentially the principles here are: the Hawks are getting Saddiq Bey, the Pistons got James Wiseman, the Warriors got Gary Payton II and some second round picks, and the Blazers got Kevin Knox and a whole bunch of second round picks, 5. So let's get the small stuff out of the way first. Saddiq Bey has been pretty good for the Hawks. They needed 3-point shooting. He's hit a ton of threes. He's hit more than half of his threes so far with the team. They've won his minutes, which is just like, yeah, if you have a guy that's hitting half of his threes on decent volume, chances are you're going to win those minutes if he's not playing a ton. He's not that good of a shooter. He's a career 36% guy. I think he can be better than that. I think he still has defensive upside. So that's, considering what Atlanta gave up, totally fine. If they end up paying him like DeAndre Hunter, which is apparently part of the reason Detroit wanted to move off of him, because he was going to have pretty wild extension demands in the neighborhood of like 90 million. Not great, but it's not like he gave up a ton to get him. So that's a B for the Hawks for me. Let's just do the Wiseman side of it next. I think we disagree on this a little bit, or at least based on your initial grade. I gave Detroit a B+, and it has nothing to do with Wiseman looking really good with the Pistons now that he's free of the Warriors and their 2 timelines and short leashes and sort of failure to accept his mistakes. Like, he's just kind of the same guy, makes tons of mistakes, can't catch the basketball, will never high point a rebound, has yet to do it in all the time I've watched him. Slow to rotate, somehow shrinks when he contests shots, and is not a massive human that's super athletic all of a sudden when he has to go up and contest in traffic. All these problems are still there. I still give Detroit a B+ because Wiseman is just the type of buy low, whatever you want to call him, lottery ticket, high risk, high ceiling, low floor type of talent that you should just be in the business of trying to acquire if you have the worst record in the league. And I guess me feeling good about the Pistons getting Wiseman requires that I don't care about the positional overlap, because Jalen Duren, Marvin Bagley, if you want to throw him in there, who just should not.
I mean, the Pistons do.
Isaiah Stewart. So yeah, there's overlap, but so the worst case scenario is that several of those guys become really good and you have to figure out what to do with playing time or trading some of them. That seems like a great problem. And I think it's a problem Detroit should hope it runs into, because otherwise we're not going to acquire this lottery ticket guy because we already have centers. One of them's a teenager. We're pretty sure he's going to no, you can't know anything about Jalen Duren yet. You have to just stockpile high upside guys the greatest extent possible. So that's my analysis of the Wiseman trade. He might suck forever, but he might be good, and Detroit should be willing to take that risk. The Warriors, I killed them. Do you have anything on those two teams, on Atlanta or Detroit, before I power through the other two?
I'm rock solid with an Atlanta B+. I mean, they gave up a lot of second rounders, but Saddiq Bey, like you said, has been good. Yeah. I don't know what this implies about, are they willing to pay him? I do think Detroit sort of, too early. I'm like, okay, he wants the DeAndre Hunter money, but he's only extension eligible. Like this, he's not on the verge of restricted. He's not even extension eligible now. Like
he's got restricted free agency next summer.
Yeah. So I mean, to get out in front of that was fine, but just to decide not. So I liked it for Atlanta overall. To just decide that you didn't want to be in the Saddiq Bey business as Detroit right now, though, for another big, that's what still gives me pause. Wiseman, I just banked on him not playing well in Detroit, especially given the confines of their offense. He's definitely been better than I've expected, and from admittedly what little I've seen of him in Detroit so far. But that being said, it's not just about, okay, and if Jalen Duren's hurt at the moment, you can find minutes for him. I get the upside play. I just don't understand what it says about the theory of Detroit's roster. And you had Troy Weaver, talking about, well, Milwaukee plays two bigs and Cleveland plays two bigs, and just presumably Laz Jackson pointed this out on the Detroit Bad Boys podcast, you would like one of those two bigs to be able to play lockdown defense, which neither Wiseman nor Duren do right now. I think Duren's potential, there's definitely through the roof there when you look at his mobility, but I don't get it. And, the fact that Wiseman's playing well or showing flashes now, okay, great. What's going to happen when, just long term between him and Duren there? It feels like it's going to come to a head. And look, you got to make a decision on him pretty soon because he's extension eligible this year. You shouldn't give him one, although they gave Marvin Bagley a contract for 3 years, all guaranteed. But R2K, I can't tell, you guys fuck. I don't know if you mean we suck or if we fuck and that's a compliment. I'm going to take it as a compliment.
Always is a compliment.
Yeah, but I get it from a talent perspective for Detroit. I just don't love, as I said, what it necessarily infers about the direction or lack of vision with how they want to flesh out this roster.
Is there is there a package that so it's not necessarily what Detroit gave up. It's not so much that they essentially gave up Bey to get Wiseman. It's just the idea for you that, because I'm not saying we could just disagree. I don't, and who the fuck knows who's right? It's going to take 3 years to figure that out. But is it just the fact that it's the positional thing, and it's what it says about, because to me, I would take Weaver's comments as this is just a substitute for what I want to say, which is we're pretty bad and we're taking home run swings on guys that we might, and it might be a strikeout. That's because he can't say that. He can't say, or that we're not confident that Duren's going to be great because we can't be. But that has to be how they feel. Is it just that there's too many centers here and it's hard to envision these, any two of these working out long term together? Is that the hang up?
Yes. And then also just so you kept Bogdanovich, which if the offer sucked, I'm all for it. I don't think he hurts your development, but and you kept Alec Burks as well. Are you super committed to winning next year? And that also worries me, but then it runs counter to what you just did with the Wiseman trade. And so, yes, we need to let it play out. And the opportunity cost was not steep. I do think it was just a little awkward that they decided, hey, we're done being in the Saddiq Bey business. They just thought he was never going to be maybe the quintessential 3-and-D wing and might have been better suited with the role that he's going to have in Atlanta. Okay, fine. But I thought that was an odd decision to make at the time. But my biggest concern is just as you outlaid, I don't understand like what the vision is for this roster. And if it's, yeah, we suck, we're taking as many swings as possible, you still have to kind of juggle those swings in tandem with one another at some point. And so I'm more interested to see what this kind of means for next season, especially when like, okay, Cade will be available at that point, presumably. And then maybe it helps that Jaden Ivey will be another year deeper into his development. Uh, I just, I don't necessarily understand the Pistons. They just seem caught in this weird space. And for a team that has some top end prospects on the roster, I would like to feel better about their direction or have more clarification on it than I actually do. But hey, look, maybe Wiseman and Duren can end up playing together, or they're both just there and it's working. And Wiseman, rehabilitates his value or establishes any value whatsoever over the long term. I would root for that. I don't want to see players fail. This was not the team for me that I thought made sense as a longer term Wiseman destination.
I think too, just to argue against myself, like zooming all the way out, it's kind of a wild move to consolidate your young talent at a position center that just doesn't really matter anymore, or matters way less than it used to. Like, yeah, if you had like Brooklyn has a million wings, or that kind of thing. Just we got 4 centers that can basically only play center, and someone like Bagley sort of can't play center or power forward. So it's just like, this is not the place to have like a surplus of guys that you're going to, 1, pay, and 2, need to get on the floor, just because the devaluation of the center just continues, unless you're a superstar or MVP candidate. So the Blazers side is kind of, to me, it's meh. We basically given up Gary Payton II for Kevin Knox and a bunch of second rounders. And I cribbed this from you in your initial evaluation, which I thought was right, which is that you kind of, if you just look at this on its own, that's just paying Payton in free agency and moving him for some seconds is kind of like, well, what was the point of all this? Even if he was hurt, which is another aspect to this deal. But the Blazers added other guys that can kind of approximate what Payton did. And one of them, Matisse Thybulle, I think, who shot it really well. Who knows if that's going to sustain? But if you're talking about which of these defense first guys would you rather have for the next couple of years, or maybe Thybulle still is ahead of Payton because of the age difference, because of the length, because of the possibility that Thybulle is going to shoot it more accurately. Like, I don't know. Payton took a while to become someone that you didn't just totally ignore on the perimeter. I think he's and really the sample of him being a good enough shooter to avoid that treatment is pretty small still, a year plus. So, I mean, I gave the Blazers a B- just because in totality, I don't really feel like they, hurt themselves that much. And if Thybulle is someone they end up keeping at a reasonable deal, maybe cheaper than they were going to be on the hook for Payton, that's totally fine. The Warriors, I kind of killed them, and it's unfair because I didn't ding the Suns for Durant being hurt. And I am essentially, or at least partially, dinging the Warriors for Payton being hurt. That's kind of a messy thing to talk about because we don't know what Portland knew. We don't know what the Warriors should have known. But ultimately, the Warriors admitted failure. They've drafted the wrong guy. They traded James Wiseman, and they got back someone that cannot help them right now. And we don't know when Payton will be able to help them. And the whole point of this was James Wiseman cannot help us. Gary Payton has, and we know can, except he's hurt. And so it was just, you've given up this asset that you held on to for too long, and you traded it for something that is basically a zero. You're going to save a little bit of money, but that's just, the Warriors spend so much that I don't know how much, tens of millions of luxury tax savings really matters. If Payton gets healthy and contributes to the Warriors finally figuring it out this season, I guess my evaluation would change. And I think certainly he does seem like someone that will be valuable next year and the year after. But it's just such a rough look. You waited too long. You gave up Wiseman, and you're not better. You're certainly not better in terms of your 5-year ceiling. I don't know if there was a scenario where Wiseman was going to be on the team that long, even into a second contract. But it's just, it hasn't. The one thing the Warriors needed was short-term help, and they don't have it. So, I mean, I gave him a D+, even if like incomplete might be a fair grade if you didn't want to, just pass judgment right away.
I gave him a C, and I'd probably stick with it. You can't criticize them for trading Wiseman for the return that they did at this time, but you can
Right.
absolutely criticize them for bag holding on Wiseman, which they were pearl clutching, which they did. And I think that's the hardest thing to reconcile. And then to not understand fully what you were getting in Gary Payton II with his injury. Like there's a lack of, I think, due diligence on their part. I just can't believe that the Blazers withheld information to the point like where they're hiding confidential health reports there. So, and like the Warriors also kind of knew that Gary Payton was dealing with injuries last year, albeit I think it was a separate one. He was dealing with a wrist injury, right, or elbow during the playoffs, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So it's not a great look for them, but you could lean more towards incomplete. I think a straight C is fine because the value relative to where Wiseman was, it's acceptable. It never should have gotten to this low before you actually moved him. There was more sheen on him a year and a half ago when you kind of understood that, okay, this is not going to work out. And so for them to just be, they won the title last year. So how much does this really matter? But what would they be in a much better position this year? Next year? Have they moved Wiseman sooner? Absolutely. And I think it's fair to ding them for that.
I wonder, like, because it's, right. I don't think the Blazers did anything, really suspect, but like all the Warriors and presumably players front office, they like, I imagine they're still in contact with Peyton. Like he was on the team all last year. Do you think there was a phone call where like Bob Myers is talking to Peyton's agent or, Steph Curry's talking to Peyton? They're like, are you good? Like if, and Peyton wants to be on the Warriors so bad that he's like 100%, I'll be ready to go day one. Get me over there. Like there's just a lot of, the disconnect is weird given the relationship between the parties involved. So I don't know. I don't know how that factors in. The other thing that kind of, if you're a Warriors fan, I think maybe you might be a little annoyed by is you could have just re-signed Peyton. Like, and then you can trade Wiseman for something else. You probably don't have DiVincenzo, who's been really good for them, who they're just going to lose in free agency this summer anyway. But
they'll just reacquire him for Moses Moody at next year's trade deadline or something.
Yeah, right. That's perfect. That's exactly what's going to happen. But just the idea that you could have had Peyton if you wanted to, and just chose not to. And now, we changed our minds. Like we're gonna give up our number 2 overall pick for him. Kind of a tough turn of events.
I do think our impressions have the potential to really brighten up if Gary Payton II, which doesn't seem like he will be, but if he's healthy playing in the postseason, because he's like everything they need. He's smaller, but like he defends like a bigger wing.
Yeah, and they need defense. I mean, their defense, especially on the road, has been. I mean, it's one of the worst defenses in the league, and just you can't. Your defense might not be great, but if Gary Payton II is on the floor, it's going to be disruptive, and and he's going to play really hard, and he's not going to take plays off or screw up routes. Like, just get him out there, and he might, like you said, he might really just address the most pressing need for this team. But who knows, right? We don't know when he's going to play.
The D'Angelo Russell trade is next up. So to recap, the Lakers got D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, and Jared Vanderbilt. The Timberwolves got Mike Conley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, a 2024 second-round pick, a 2025 second-round pick, and a 2026 second-round pick. The Jazz received Russell Westbrook, who they already bought out, and he joined the Clippers, Juan Toscano-Anderson, Damian Jones, and a 2027 first-round pick from the Lakers. It is, top 4 protected, and it just expires if it doesn't convey that year. For the Lakers, I gave them an A on the day of, and I'm giving them an A again. It's an A. LeBron's tendon injury, yes, it's troubling, and it diminishes the ceiling on this season. This trade wasn't, and D'Lo has missed a bunch of time after only appearing in 3 games and change, but he's supposed to come back soon. This trade wasn't just about this season. But let's look at this season. Since the trade, the Lakers have the best defense in the league. They're 7-4, and they've been able to survive largely without LeBron James and D'Angelo Russell. That wouldn't have been possible before the trade. They had Jared Vanderbilt, been a shot of adrenaline for them defensively. You look at Malik Beasley, the 3-point volume, and he's hitting just enough of them still, over 35% in LA. And there was a big dip for him in Utah after he started out the season, surface of the sun hot. Those are players that are helping you right now. Malik Beasley is opening up the floor for you. Jared Vanderbilt, the minutes with him and AD have actually been pretty good so far. But as I reiterate, this trade wasn't just about this season. It wasn't, because you've now elevated your ceiling, whether you're fully healthy or not, on this year. But you've also not compromised anything in the way of cap space if you want to have it this summer. Malik Beasley, team option. Jared Vanderbilt, non-guaranteed salary. And then D'Angelo Russell, a free agent, obviously. I would keep all of them, and then you can look at moving them later if need be. But if you want to have cap space, Mo Bamba's contract is non-guaranteed. Rui Hachimura is a restricted free agent. So your flexibility is not damaged here. And I think that you just have an overall more sensible product to do all of this while giving up one first-round pick that is safeguarded against disaster in the event that you absolutely positively suck. That's a big win for a Lakers team and a front office that, quite frankly, has really sucked over the past couple of years, ever since they won the title. And they kind of stumbled into that title team thanks to LeBron and AD forcing their way there. But you did have KCP already there, Kuzma already there. The roster made sense. You decided to actively pay to make it not make sense. And now you make a trade like this, which I think was a home run then, and it's a home run now, regardless of what happens. We know D'Lo will be back. The bigger thing is what's going on with LeBron. And the final thing that I wrote about here is there's probably also something to be said, even though I don't think he was the only problem, just getting rid of Russell Westbrook changes like the way that your rotation can run, the way that you're going to play. So I think that helped as well. And so this trade, I think you could even go as far as an A+, but there is just some, okay, did you really trade a distant first rounder with loose protection when this team tops out as a play-in victor? Like you can definitely skew it that way, but it was an A then and it's an A still for me now.
It was so much better than I could have imagined the Lakers. You know, it's just such a better return than I could have ever imagined was going to be on the table. I'm not a D'Angelo Russell fan. So I guess I don't really have any notes. It's an A for me. I think Jared Vanderbilt is so good and so important and just like such a perfect piece for that team specifically, or for really almost any team. So even if I'm not the biggest Russell guy, I think Beasley has a ton of value just because you have to guard him. Even if he's hitting like 32%, you're going to chase him around like crazy and guard him, and that's going to help. And Vanderbilt, we love. I want to get to the Timberwolves side of this for you because you kind of killed him, and I get it. But before you get into it, I get hung up on, well, the Wolves were going to lose Russell for nothing. And I always do this. And you've a lot of times talked me down and say like, well, yeah, he's a free agent, but you know, there's a sign and trade possibility and there's all this other stuff. And I don't always acknowledge that, but that was kind of one of the driving forces in me not being super down on Minnesota's end of this. It's still certainly worse than the Lakers, but you know, you can give me your overall impression, but do the Wolves get any points, I guess, and based on your grade, probably not, for just heading off we either lose D'Lo for nothing or overpay him at the pass? Does that's not a concern for you?
It's if he was actually going to leave and not give them the chance to re-sign him, which there is, despite what some people said in the chat, there's no evidence that he was just going to leave. And even if he did, sign and trade possibilities open up. There's a chance that you could have gotten more for him then or than you did now. I like Mike Conley, but like this is what I wrote. When like you're trading this 26-year-old point guard for someone who's almost 10 years older than him, and D'Lo was in the middle of one of the best stretches of his career. Conley has shown that he can still be the connective tissue on the offensive end. He has not been what you would call good as a scorer. You've lost some creative juice there, and I think you've also seen the strain put on Anthony Davis during those minutes. The fact that you felt you needed to do this trade is a further indictment. And Brent is saying in the chat, you're going to need to link me or something, that D'Lo said he was leaving and was also toxic in locker room, wouldn't pass to Gobert. The latter is just not true. He was getting frustrated because Gobert was bobbling passes. I did not see anywhere, I don't know if you did, Grant, that D'Lo said he was going to leave. I must have missed that.
I hadn't seen that, but I had seen a lot of allusions to guys making comments to the effect of like, we know what the real problem is. I feel like I forget who said that, but it implied that Russell was someone that guys did not like playing with. And that's not that's not a new thing necessarily for him.
Fair.
Like, so that's part of the reason I'm kind of out on him. But like, I can't quibble with any of your points. Like, he's in his mid-20s, he's in his prime. He's probably overall a better player than Conley.
The other thing that's been jarring though, is they were 14-7 with basically a top 10 offense and defense over their last 21 games before the trade deadline. That's without Karl Anthony Towns. They are now, since the trade deadline, 4-5, below average offense and defense. And Mike Conley, as good as you might think is at the intangibles, he is a defensive upgrade over D'Lo. You're not replacing what D'Lo was doing from a pure output perspective with Mike Conley averaging fewer than 10 points per game and 5 assists. And that's something that you have to look at. And the fact that you felt you needed, that you couldn't subsist with D'Angelo Russell and Anthony Edwards driving your offense when Rudy Gobert was your primary big man is a further indictment on the Rudy Gobert trade, which we both clearly missed on. I was high on that in the moment. I noted that in the regrade. I think that this feels like, to me, I wrote, it's an overcorrection to their previous overcorrection, which was the Gobert trade. So I don't know, like Conley on $24.4 million next season at age 36, that's not going to be an asset. Is there going to be drop off there? Yes, there's a lot left to be said about this team because we need to see what they look like once Karl-Anthony Towns comes back. The offense still hasn't been good with Gobert, Edwards, and Conley on the court yet. It's in, I think, like the 35th percentile of efficiency. So you can say whatever you want about the fit, how good Conley has been. The results have not been there through their first. I think he's played 8 games for them or 7 or whatever it's been. So, and 9 games total since the trade deadline. You took at best a risk here, and at worst, like I said, I just feel like it's an overcorrection to what was your offseason overcorrection. And I think that this team long term is going to be worse off for it. They get a D-, by the way. I gave the Wolves. That was after I gave them, I think, like a C+ in real time.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that low. I understand the reasoning. I think it really, we haven't even talked about Nickeil Alexander-Walker yet, who's actually like, I kind of hung on to a little bit of his stock and I feel good about it. I just think once he's reined in his shot selection, he has the potential to be, I think, a really good like reserve scorer, and he's been good for them. I would say, like, this is total cherry picking, and I would like roll my eyes at someone that used this evidence on with such a small sample to argue with me. But the Wolves are plus 5.8 per 100 with Conley on the floor. They're minus 5.1 with D'Lo on the floor. Like that's, Conley's played 270 non-garbage possessions. So like 2 opponent threes over that stretch could put this to 0 more than like, or, something ridiculous. But like, I think maybe I'm just too enamored of the idea of Conley, where game manager, organizes things, knows where to be, knows what to do, even if like athletically and in terms of mobility just isn't close to what he was. And Russell is just the opposite of that in so many ways. But in terms of like asset value and if the team chemistry stuff was overblown, it's hard for me to say that, Conley just is objectively a better player to have, especially like you said, the results in the record department have suggested that he's not. But I wouldn't go quite as low as D-. I don't know. It'd be in the C range for me probably. But yeah, I mean, the Lakers, we haven't talked about the Jazz. You want to get the Jazz? We just agree the Lakers just hammered this trade, and that's all there is to it.
I was actually surprised that the Jazz got not killed, but people were disappointed in this trade. And I guess seeing what Jared Vanderbilt's doing now, I kind of understand. But Conley was probably close to net negative money to other teams. And Jared Vanderbilt wasn't a good fit on their roster, and they weren't showcasing him as soon as the Walker Kessler emergence came. Beasley's 3-point percentage had plummeted after a scorching hot start, like I noted. And so I don't think the Jazz actively took a worse offer than what was out there. And even let's say they could have turned this group into 2 first-round picks. They would have been first-round picks that were in the 20s this year, next year or something. They have enough bites at the apple immediately. You want to get and they have enough bites at the long-term apple too, thanks to those Cleveland and Minnesota trades from the offseason. But you take the higher end swings, and getting a 2027 Lakers pick that's only top 4 protected is the higher end swing. And acquiring Russ now is not what it was like over the summer, not what it was like during the previous season. Most of the season was gone. He had made most of his money. Your transaction game is done because you're not looking to make further trades because the deadline has passed. I think they did fine. I gave them a B-, and they're clearly interested in not winning this season when you look at some of the units that they're running anyway. And, I think the Jazz at this point, if they want to, this includes them waiving Kelly Olynyk, they can get to almost $60 million, whatever, in cap space. There's value in that to leasing it out with teams that are looking to dump contracts. There's value in that if they want to inflate the restricted free agency market. If they decide, hey, we're going to make Charlotte pay through the teeth for PJ Washington and give him an offer sheet, they can facilitate other trades. They can make trades of their own. And so I was fine with the value that they received on this. I was actually surprised that many thought they were going to get a lot more. And I thought they might have gotten a little bit more. Let me be clear. I
Yeah.
was surprised that this was just like the meat and potatoes there. But after like sort of settling in and thinking about it, okay, yeah, like I think it was fine what they did. And they're still just super flexible moving forward. And I think the big key here is that no one they gave up profiled as just a long-term cast member for the next iteration of Jazz basketball.
I think I mostly agree. I would have probably gone down to like a C minus just because I think Vanderbilt might be on that level of like a long term piece. But like had they, and so my knee jerk when this happened was like, oh, I really thought they could get two firsts just for, between Beasley and Vanderbilt. But I think you're right. Maybe it would have looked better. The optics would have been better if you'd gotten two firsts. But I don't think realistically had they traded with somebody else, you were going to get two good firsts. And so the upside on that Lakers pick is significant. Like that's a real, potentially extremely valuable first that is like, it just doesn't have the same appeal as, oh, we got two firsts, we got one for each of them. So I go a little lower just for the reason being, I think Vanderbilt's just really good. And I think you could have just held on to him. Maybe the fit, I hate to talk about fit with young teams, but like, can he play with Walker Kessler? Is there enough? Are you going to get enough shooting there? I don't know. But yeah, I can't really argue too much with you on that one. You ready to move to the Jakob Poeltl trade?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so I've decided that basically the Raptors got Jakob Poeltl back after a 4-year like soccer transfer to the Spurs. And so now he's back in and they're going to have to pay him. And that's maybe a problem. But the deal itself is the Spurs got Kim Birch, a top 6 protected 2024 first, a 23 second, and a 25 second for Jakob Poeltl. Pretty solid return for the Spurs. So I gave them an A minus, and that's building in just the fact that, like, I think Poeltl is what would you say Poeltl is an average starting center, like somewhere in the 10 to 15 range as a starting center? Like if you're
Yeah, I think
ranking,
that's fair.
yeah, like so, he's not going to change your life, but like you feel okay with him as a starter. But he's 27 and the Spurs are super young and starting over, and Poeltl's free agency, the number that was out there, I think actually, honestly, a lot of my evaluation of this trade depends on how close to the reported 20 million per year Poeltl might be getting on his next deal. Because if it's, I don't know, way down on the low end and he makes like the mid-level, then I don't know, the Spurs maybe shouldn't have done this. But you got that first, and that's big. So that's a good return for someone that probably you weren't going to Dan Favale loves this analysis. And you know what? We love Dan Favale. But shouldn't that have been not Dan Favale? Can you
I
do
don't
that?
know. I don't know. I haven't seen his profile there.
We need
We
a
need to make
burner comment account. So yeah, I think I don't have any complaints about this because I don't think Poeltl was part of the future. I don't think he should have been in San Antonio, and this is a good move to get something before you maybe lose him or overpay him. The Raptors side, so A minus Spurs if that wasn't clear. The Raptors side is trickier because Poeltl clearly gives them a lot of things they needed: rim protection, someone who can facilitate a little bit from the elbows. Hopefully that helps your half court offense, which has also been bad since the Raptors have gone positionless. And while he's basically done that, I think the stat I had when I was writing this up was, Toronto was 23rd in opponent attempt frequency at the rim. So it's easy to get a lot of shots up at close range against Toronto. And with Poeltl on the floor so far, he's knocked that down 7%, and that would put them, if you judge the Raptors' opponent attempts at the rim with Poeltl on the floor against like the league wide figures for the full season, they'd be in the top 5 range. So like he is addressing what they needed addressed. But just as the bigger picture in terms of the finances for Toronto, his unrestricted free agency is coming up in a few months. You're going to have to decide what he's worth. And then you have to also do that in the context of Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr., who you did not trade at the deadline, also are going to need to be paid or signed and traded or whatever, because they're both going to hit free agency. So it makes me a little uncomfortable that Toronto may have like pot committed itself a little bit, because you don't want to give up a first if you don't intend to keep the player you're getting back in theory. So I just gave them a C because of the potential for this to look like a bigger mistake depending on how free agency shakes out. But it's hard to deny that Pirtle does do for Toronto what it needed done.
I'd agree with everything you said about the Spurs, and to get such a loosely protected pick is good for them when Pirtle was headed towards free agency. I will say that's also why I'm not lower on this for Toronto, is that ever since the trade deadline, I've heard nothing but, how poor the
The draft
2024 draft
sucks.
class is going to be. And so,
Yeah.
all right, top 6 protected pick, that's fine. Like, it's sort of just, and if you're good, it's just sort of like a flashy bell and whistle of, well, it's going to be number 21 anyway, but we gave you top 6 protection or whatever it is. I am with you overall. I thought that they were going to be more sellers than buyers, and they haven't been good enough since the trade deadline, even though, Fred VanVleet looks a lot more comfortable having a real screener and roller next to him. And as you already mentioned, the stuff with Jakob Pertl's rim protection, are they going to pay everybody? VanVleet, GTJ have a player option. OG Anunoby extension eligible. Probably won't sign one, but he's going to hit free agency in 2024. Siakam's going to be extension eligible, and he might actually sign one if you're willing to go there. And I don't know. The answer is, and I don't have a great feel for this team. They're still not deep enough. They still need more advantage creation and shooting to me. Scotty Barnes will be, remains a big swing piece for them. But I don't know. This team feels uninspiring. I would not have made the deal. I don't think it's unforgivable, but I don't necessarily understand the theory of what the next step forward is for them now. And they've also made it harder to pull off future trades just because now you have that 2024 pick floating around. The soonest first round pick you can convey now is 2026, which just makes pulling other moves off more difficult. And so a big test for them will be like, are they kind of a surprise team in the play-in, or do they give a team a really tough first-round matchup? We were both very high on them coming into the season. Mm-hmm. Fred VanVleet shooting has really yet to normalize too, so maybe that ticks up. Pascal Siakam has been spectacular. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of talent at the top of this roster. They're still not the deepest team, but there's a lot of talent at the top of this roster. It just hasn't coalesced into anything special.
I think macro for the Raptors, we both think Siakam's great and has had a good season. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think Toronto still needs a player that is better than anyone they currently have to be like a real contender threat. And I mean, you just look at, that was the case when they had Kawhi in 2019. And I wonder if, and I'm concerned, I guess, I'm curious what you think, this move makes it to me seem much more likely that like this is the group, right? You bring back VanVleet and Trent, it seems, and you re-sign Pirtle, and like this is just your group. And I think one of the reasons we were high on them is that we saw like organic growth potential, certainly from Barnes, certainly from Anunoby again. And now you're really banking on that. If you just bring all these guys back, and as Brent points out, Raptors will be good, but will have cash problems as they have some nice assets. Yeah, I mean, like you're potentially just looking at a team that all its money is going to be committed for a long time if it keeps the guys that it needs to keep this offseason. So you always have options, but I think the idea that this may be locking in this group it gives me a little bit of pause. I don't know how you feel about it.
I'm with you, but I will almost be impressed if they do bring everyone back, because it means that they've foot the bill for it. And I'm thinking of all these players. Let's look at VanVleet, even go further ahead with Anunoby, and there's also Trent and Pirtle this season. And let's say Siakam signs an extension. How many of those are likely to age poorly to where they can't be trade assets? And I don't think that number is necessarily high. I might be a little bit worried about Pirtles. I don't think he's going to get anywhere near that $20 million number that we saw. Maybe I haven't fully grasped the new cap climate with the salary cap going up, but I don't think any of those players on their next deal can still be assets. There's a chance that maybe VanVleet gets a little too old. Do you just overpay to keep Gary Trent Jr. shooting? Because we already had that discussion on the previous pod, as I mentioned with Pirtle. I don't think OG Anunoby will wind up getting like what OG Anunoby does will always be valued, even if he's a tick above market value. Yeah. So that is one route for them to go, is just, hey, let's go into next season with this group. And if it doesn't work, we'll just, that's when we'll trade everybody, or we'll go through next season and then make that call, because we'll have these guys under long-term contract.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that's all I have on that one.
So the next trade is the Josh Hart to New York trade, which, to recap, the Knicks got Josh Hart, the Blazers got Ryan Arcidiacono, Steve Mikhailuk, Cam Reddish, and a lottery protected 2023 first round pick that turns into 4 seconds if it's not conveyed, which was super interesting because like you're getting the one shot at the first round pick, and then it's going to turn into 4 seconds. I initially gave the Knicks a C for this trade. I've upgraded them to an A- because Josh Hart has been spectacular. I do think his 3-point shooting has been overblown here just because he's still taking fewer than 3 attempts per 36 minutes, but he is shooting almost, 60% basically from three since the Knicks, shooting well on twos again as well. And he's been great on defense for them. And he just infects the offense with energy, ball movement, and you can just see it catch on for everybody. And this still could look semi-foolish if he leaves in free agency because the Knicks are not good enough to give up what will be a first-round pick, a bottom 10 first-round pick, but it will be a first-round pick. They are not good enough to just give that up for a rental. It just doesn't seem like you make that trade without knowing you're going to resign Josh Hart. He already came out and said before we recorded this podcast, actually via Hoops Hype, that he wants to stay in New York. So I was wrong about it. I didn't love the Josh Hart trade at the time. I love it for them now. And I think I underestimated the value of, we just have an alternative to not just Deuce McBride minutes, but RJ Barrett minutes, Quentin Grimes minutes. And you bring in this guy who can really rebound, run the floor. And like I said, he injects and then infects. Like it catches on ball movement, pace in general. And the Knicks have been slaughtering. And I've also been pleasantly surprised with how much Tom Thibodeau has been willing to play Hart, Quickly, and Brunson together. Because yes, Hart has always played bigger than he is, but I feel like Tom Thibodeau invests a lot in sort of traditional size. And to have those three guys on the court at the same time, they've obliterated opponents during those stretches. Josh Hart has essentially augmented a lot of stuff that the Knicks were just doing before. Their offense was thermonuclear before the trade deadline. I know everyone's like, well, look at what the Knicks have done since the trade deadline. They've been on the ascent since like basically December at this point, most certainly since the new year. So I ended up loving the trade for them. I'll throw it to you. Would you add anything on the Knicks before we get to the Blazers?
No, I just the uncertainty about Hart's future was always like the complicating factor. And look, I mean, what's he gonna say? I'm not gonna resign. I don't want to be here. Like he's not gonna say that. So I don't put a ton of stock into him saying he would like to be back. I think that's just I don't think that's necessarily untrue, but it just doesn't like sway me one way or the other. I think because that pick, Josh Hart is worth the number 23 pick or whatever it is, like that to me is a fair trade-off, assuming you can keep him. I do wish he'd shoot it more. It's still, like you said, he's playing like 4 fewer minutes per game, but he's taking 2.3 threes a game. And it was at 2.2 in Portland. And everybody just couldn't shut up about like why won't he shoot it? Why won't he shoot it? He's not really shooting it that much more. He's making 60% of them. So I wonder how we would feel about Josh Hart in New York if he was making 35% of them or 30% like he was in Portland. I still really like him. The fit totally works. And there's also just the kind of, I feel like it happened immediately that the Knicks fans were like, this is our guy. Like
the Knicks fans knew, apparently. Yeah.
Yeah. This is someone that we want to support. And like, I don't know how you throw that into a trade evaluation, but if everybody's happy, I think that's a good thing. So yeah, I don't have anything for the Knicks side. I was more concerned about it like you were, just because like, well, what if we're giving up this first rounder for a guy who's definitely going to be a free agent because his weird option was just he could make more, certainly get more years. But if he's back, it's totally worth the pick.
For the Blazers, I gave them a C+, and my initial grade for them, I think, was about the same, if I'm not mistaken. I actually don't necessarily remember it, but Cam Reddish has been good for them. He's hitting over 39% of his threes, over 50% of his twos. He's actually playing. Doesn't feel like he has as much tunnel vision when he's on the ball either. But like we've kind of accepted that, they got a first round pick and a nice flyer on Cam Reddish because they weren't going to pay Josh Hart. We're just allowed to give them a pass because they weren't going to pay Josh Hart. I understand he wasn't the cleanest fit there, but some of their defensive issues that were already in place have gotten worse since he left, which is teams are throwing parades at the rim, and a lot of that is Yusuf Nurkic has been injured. They can't grab a rebound to save their lives, which he can absolutely help in that department. And just like, Cam Reddish will be cheaper at least he should be cheaper in restricted free agency. Josh Hart will be in unrestricted free agency. But did you get the better player? Did you feel the bigger need with Cam Reddish? Unless he just sort of pops defensively, I would disagree. Or unless you're viewing this through the lens of, well, we're going to move Anthony Simons and like Cam Reddish is going to be like that guy that guard next to Dame now. No one views Cam Reddish in that light, regardless of how promising he's been. And I get that they were kind of giving themselves, they took mini swings on Cam Reddish and Matisse Thybulle. One or both might pay off. And so I've been pleasantly surprised. Like Matisse Thybulle has hit like almost 50% of his 3-point attempts while he's been in Portland, and he's taken off 4.5 in 31.6 minutes per game. I will be shocked if that sustains, but like that's if it ends up panning out, okay, fine. My main issue is what it said about how non-committed they are to maximizing the best version of Damian Lillard we've ever seen. And this team continues, and it is now an issue that spans multiple regimes, from Neil O'Shea to Joe Cronin. They're just angling for singles and doubles and never going for the home run swing. And I think that Damian Lillard, the best version of him, is now suffering because of it. And this team has already suffered because of it. And so I dinged them for that. This was a lack of invention in my opinion. I do think that Team Crop said Tybal did a Euro step layup last night, and literally all he did. I did not see that. But look, maybe it all pans out. I just don't like the lack of immediacy or urgency. And if you would have came out and said, we're taking a step back this year to better position ourselves for the future, I might have given you a better grade, but you actively tried to make it sound like you were buying at the deadline. And then you just laid this like long, wet sounding fart instead. And finally, how does this position you to get better for the future if you're just looking at trades? That Knicks pick, number 21, 23, whatever it ends up being, is not going to be the difference between pulling off a blockbuster and not. Having Cam Reddish and Matisse Thybulle's bird rights are not going to be the difference to that and not. So it's not a terrible trade. It's just you have this version of Damian Lillard, and this is what you did. That's just sort of where I'm at.
Yeah, if I were looking for reasons to excuse the Blazers here, I think it's maybe just that they decided that, correctly, I think Josh Hart's going to opt out, and we kind of care more about Jeremy Grant. And we have finite resources, but this just goes back to your singles and doubles thing, which I can't really argue with. I think the Knicks have greater reason and more resources, I think, and greater reason to believe that they can keep Hart, and the Blazers probably didn't feel the same way. Whether they should have just said, screw it, we're going to pay what it costs to keep all these guys together and trade our first or trade our picks for something else. I don't know. But if you're looking for reasons to sort of give Portland a pass, that's got to be it. They just didn't think that didn't want to, pay what it was going to cost to keep Hart. But that doesn't undo anything you said about you guys are blowing it right now with Damian Lillard playing the best basketball of his life. It's a tough look.
Do you want to take us to the Jay Crowder trade? I feel like this can be a very quick one.
Yeah, it's just, even though there's 3 teams involved, it's really just Crowder to the Bucks that we care about. The Nets got a couple seconds. The Pacers got George Hill, Serge Ibaka, Jordan Nwora, and also some more seconds. If you forgot, this was the trade deadline of second round picks. Like 7 million of them got traded. So real quick on the Pacers, I think Jordan Nwora, like I've always kind of liked him. I think he's played a lot better. He's played more with Indiana. He's on the books for 3.2 million next year, which is totally reasonable considering his age, position he plays, upside potential is there. So that's a minor thing. Really, this is just Crowder to the Bucks. And I ended up giving the Bucks a C, and it's kind of, I'm trying to balance. I can't remember what your initial grade was, but I'm trying to balance. For sure, Milwaukee was in search of someone that could close games, in the deep playoffs for them. Crowder sort of profiles as that type of guy. To me, he's fouling more than ever. He's looked a little slow. He is hitting his threes, 38.1% so far. I'm concerned that maybe and I think you probably talked about this at the time, if I remember, this isn't 2020 or 21 Jay Crowder. This is, he's 32. He didn't really have a step to lose athletically, and maybe this is knocking the rust off, but maybe it's not. So I think he may still profile as a better option than like Joe Ingles or even Pat Connaughton or Grayson Allen to close games. haven't seen a lot of evidence necessarily that he's like a no-brainer for that spot, and that's really all the Bucks cared about. But then it's not like they gave up a ton to get him. So it's just a C for now. And this is almost like, let's see. You can't really fully judge it until Crowder does or does not have like 3 good games in a playoff series. That's kind of just that's a coward's way out, but that's kind of where I am on it. Gave the Pacers a B, gave the Nets a B plus. They got something for nothing, basically.
Yeah, that was an understated part of the Kevin Durant trade, was insisting on Jay Crowder being there so that you could just turn around, flipping for a bunch of second round equity.
Yeah. No, I think you know, there was just no scenario where Crowder was going to be a part of the Nets. So just getting anything is good job by you. I have them technically winning this trade with the highest grade at a B plus, which feels wrong, but that's where
I gave Milwaukee a C plus, and I think I would stick with a C plus just because you gave up a bunch of second round picks for someone who's currently logging like under 20 minutes per game, and you don't necessarily know what he's going to be. But I also do think that he opens up a lot of the most interesting lineup combinations for them come playoff time. And so that if we fast forward to the first round, second round conference finals, this could wind up being a home run for them. Maybe he only plays 23, 25 minutes a game. Maybe not even. That could still end up helping them a ton. It increases their depth. And he is someone who you play him with Giannis as the lone big. You play him with Giannis and Brook or Giannis and Bobby Portis. That just opens up a lot of different things. I don't know how much he helps your half court offense. If he's hitting his threes, like you said, I think he's at like 37.5% or whatever since the trade, that'll be fine. And you also have the ability to keep him beyond this year. I don't know what he costs. And they already showed like they lost PJ Tucker after acquiring him midseason, but he also, while not scoring a ton, he really helped spearhead that title push. I don't think Jay Crowder is going to necessarily do something similar, but I think it's eminently justifiable. And there's would I have made the deal? Probably, if I was Milwaukee, knowing what limited you are in assets. That's a lot of second round picks they give up for someone who just hasn't played all year and who was on the final year of his contract.
Yeah. I mean, to defend the Bucks a little more too, even though I graded them lower than you did. If you think about the teams that they in theory are going to have to beat, I feel okay with Crowder because I'm worried about his ability to stay with like quicker matchups. You have Drew Holiday, so he's always going to handle the most threatening, like point guard, shooting guard, maybe even small forward. But if you got to get through Tatum and Brown, and you also need someone that might need to bang around with Al Horford, like Crowder's a pretty good option for that. I think he's also a decent matchup, maybe not as good against the Sixers, because if you have, he can hang with Harden probably if you need him to do that. I don't know what Drew Holiday maybe chases Tyrese Maxey around. I think the Cavs profile is a team that might give the Bucks a little bit of trouble just matchup wise. If you have Holiday on Mitchell, I don't know who's chasing Garland around. That's going to be an interesting one. But I do think Crowder, generally speaking, like he might not be great against every matchup, but I do think against a couple of the teams that Milwaukee's going to need to go through, I feel like okay about that because there's not a ton of burners on like the Celtics, for example.
You ready to move on to the Eric Gordon trade?
Yes, let's hit it.
This one was a 3-teamer, and the Rockets got Danny Green and John Wall, both bought out, and then a 2023 first-round swap. And then the Clippers receive Eric Gordon, a 2024 second-round pick, two 2024 second-round picks, and a 2027 second-round pick. And the Grizzlies received Luke Kennard. I think so let's start with the Rockets. I gave them a B-. I think that you could grade them lower because they bag held with Eric Gordon as well. You might have been able to get an outright first-rounder. But you kind of forced Steven Silas to change your rotation. There are players who are getting more minutes now in Gordon's absence. We've seen Josh Christopher play a little bit more. Tari Eason get some more playing time. There's value there. And then you're also going to exercise this swap because you have the right to swap the Clippers pick with Milwaukee or whatever it is. So you're going to exercise the swap is my point. So there's value in that. I gave them a B-. You have anything to add on them?
No, not really. Other than like, I think I was hung up on, go back like 2 deadlines, at least one, thinking like, oh, surely Eric Gordon's going to get him really like a legit first rounder. But that assumes like those offers were on the table and the Rockets said no. We don't know that that's the case. So a little bit underwhelming, framed against like the last couple of years and what we thought might have been possible, but it's hard to get that upset about it. I think the Rockets just took the best offer they could, and maybe if it was less than we expected, so what?
I'm stumbling because I'm seeing one of our editors like deleted all the pick protections I included in our article, which is actually aggravating me at the moment. I don't know why. I was trying to figure out what the swap was. So I don't know why they would delete that. That's actually really frustrating. I gave the Clippers an A the first time around, and I dropped them down to a B this time. I think Gordon has been fine on offense. He's hit his threes. He's been pretty bad on defense, worse than I thought he was going to be. And he's also playing up until their most recent win. He was playing over Terrence Mann in crunch time. I don't know how much this trade factors into that because Russell Westbrook was also playing ahead of Terrence Mann.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, if you kind of had an inkling you were going to get Russell Westbrook or sign a ball dominant guard, did you really need to go out and get Eric Gordon? You didn't give anything up too much of value. And I like Eric Gordon more than I like Russell Westbrook, but you made both those moves. I didn't really know how to view it, but Gordon is not performed up to snuff defensively since being in LA. And I think if this trade was going to mean in any way, because of the other moves you're going to make or independent of the other moves, that you were just going to be less reliant on Terrence Mann, I would have definitely not have given it a day. I was so high on it in the moment, and now I'm tepid at best.
Yeah, this is another one that, I mean, it's not quite like Crowder in Milwaukee because who knows what the Clippers' playoff future is going to hold based on how they've looked generally over the last season. I don't know how long to go back. I feel like a B is fine. I like you. I don't know how to divorce it from the larger series of moves that have involved Russell Westbrook being on this team and like what that does to the rotation. I don't know. I can't ding this trade unless it was like this was all part of a larger plan that centered on Westbrook like mattering for the Clippers, which just was never. I mean, this has to be the last. This has got nothing to do with the trade, but like this has to be the last time a team decides we're going to listen to our other stars that still think Russell Westbrook is helpful and bring him aboard, right? Like this is the last it has to be.
And then the final team in this deal, the Grizzlies, I gave them, what did I give them initially? I gave them a B plus. I dropped that down to a B. Kennard is hitting his threes. The defense has been awful with him on the court. Offenses are going after him. I do not know how to juggle that with the Grizzlies don't have Steven Adams. A lot of his minutes have come with only one of Dylan Brooks or Jaren Jackson Jr., if not both, without both of them. So that has to be factored in the equation as well. But it's also just like, you knew Steven Adams was going to be injured at the time. So I think Kennard fills a need, but it's just not it's not big enough filler to address their most glaring weaknesses, which will now be laid bare because of John Morant not being around them. They could not have, or I guess maybe they could have predicted that, but that was never going to factor into the calculus that they approached the trade deadline with. I think it was a solid move. And I also, one of the other benefits is even if you want the Grizzlies to make a bigger swing, which I did because they should have, but you folded Danny Green's expiring contract into now money, digestible money for the next 2 seasons. He has a team option, Luke Kennard on the final year of his contract, both worth $15.4 million a pop. You can put that into other trades. And so you've increased your optionality there. It didn't cost you any first round equity now. It's a solid B move, but that's disappointing for a team that I think needed very clearly like an A minus or like an A plus swing. It didn't need to be like the A plus player, but could they have done anything to get Mikal Bridges out of Brooklyn? I was not an OG Anunoby fan for them, but could they have done anything to get Kuzma out of Washington? Maybe those options weren't out there, but we know that the Grizzlies have kind of been circling this or running in this circle for the past 2 seasons where they haven't really been linked or shown interest in making that bigger swing. This just feels like more evidence of that. Again, though, I think that Luke Kennard is someone just providing the functional shooting and spacing and movement. That's going to be excellent or should be very helpful for them in the playoffs. Can you hold up defensively, though, if Steven Adams is going to be injured, if Jaren Jackson Jr. might be in foul trouble, if you're not going to tie Luke Kennard to, well, we have to play both Triple J and Dylan Brooks with him because I think that's what you kind of need to do.
Yeah, I think it's weird. Like, it shouldn't be that hard to survive defensively with Kennard on the floor. I mean, I guess certainly if he's out there with Morant, which like you don't want to acquire someone that like you can't play with your best player. That'd be a weird move. I think if he's out there with Morant, that's 2 guys to go at for defenses. That just makes offense pretty simple. You just involve either of them in a pick and roll and you may get something good. But if you have 3 really good defenders behind them, it shouldn't be, fatal. I would say like Kennard is doing the stuff that we want him to do, more so in Memphis. I mean, he's shooting more threes per 36 minutes. And he's hitting half of them. And his assists per 36 are higher than they've been at any point since 1920 when he was at 4.5. He's at 3.3. I feel like it's always been acknowledged that Kennard can do like a little bit more as a facilitator, but he also needs to shoot more. So he's kind of worked out in terms of like just the niche skills you needed him to provide. So I still like it. I think you could argue that like he's the best player in this trade. Is that crazy? Like, is he better? Is he better than Eric Gordon? I think
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
probably, right? He doesn't have the track record. And then Danny Green and John Wall, that's like, nothing fancy there unless Danny Green turns back into like 2014 Danny Green. So I'm good with this for the Grizzlies, even if, as you pointed out, like there are going to be potential hiccups defensively that you got to sort of figure out. Because I think he is someone that, like, just another knockdown shooter, if he would shoot more, is super valuable to the Grizzlies, especially if Morant's not going to be a high volume or accurate 3-point shooter like ever, which is sort of what it looks like now.
3 ultra quick hitters to throw at you was the Bones Highland trade. The Clippers got Bones Highland. The Nuggets got a 2024 and 2025 second round pick from the Clippers in that deal, which I believe they flipped some or both of them to get Thomas Bryant from the Lakers.
I mean, it doesn't feel great for the Clippers, right? Because Bones just hasn't been playing that much. I don't have the numbers up in front of me.
He's not. So I mean, yeah, the Russell Westbrook trade kind of,
yet again, the Westbrook thing,
the signing, not the trade, but still, for 2 second rounders, why not take the swing on him? I'm actually he must have been a very big like locker room detriment if the Nuggets just decided we're going to give up on him for 2 second round picks.
You know what I've decided on that now that you brought that point back up is I think I like it much more for Denver, just because that's kind of like that's the right decision. I feel like if you're moving on from a guy that you're like, this is going to be our 6th man of the year candidate, 2 years into the career, something was up, and the willingness to be like, we have too good of a thing going and we cannot let someone compromise it. Makes me feel good about Denver understanding like what really matters. So it's a weird move, but I've decided to spin it that way just in this last 30 seconds.
I think that's fine, but the fact that I think you contributed to his declining value by just erasing him from existence, they allowed the situation to deteriorate so quickly, and I can't imagine they didn't have any idea this was sort of brewing behind the scenes entering the season. So I get it, but I do think they contributed to kind of his value reaching its absolute nadir.
Maybe so. Maybe the move would have been to trade him last offseason if you had suspicions that this was going to be the way it would go. Because I bet you could have got more for him over the summer than at the deadline.
I don't doubt that.
Yeah.
The Josh Richardson trade. Pelicans got Josh Richardson for Devontae Graham and 4 second round picks.
Well, nothing's gone right for the Pelicans, but I still think that makes total sense. Graham just wasn't going to be a factor, and Richardson is theoretically the rangy wing type that could help them. But I don't know how you judge anything with New Orleans right now.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't like that he was playing over Trey Murphy III in higher leverage moments at first, and he's not shooting the ball from 3 particularly well, but I'm fine with it. To get off Devontae Graham's deal without giving up a first was big. The other one, Mason Plumlee, the Clippers is whatever. This one was interesting. The OKC Thunder getting Dario Saric for Darius Bazley, essentially. They got Dario Saric in a second round pick for Darius Bazley.
I mean, I saw Saric. First of all, against the Warriors the other night, I totally forgot Saric was on the Thunder because I just saw him on the bench. Like, how about that? And then he came in and he proceeded to get like 5 offensive. I'm exaggerating, like a bunch of offensive rebounds and just be super valuable for a little stretch of time. I like Saric. He's shooting 48% from deep. He's only played 10 games. He's playing like 14 minutes a game, but making 60+% from the field, playing super hard, getting a bunch of boards. Like
he was just playing well in Phoenix when he was traded too. Anyone who framed that, I'm sorry to interrupt, is like, oh, well, they're getting Bazley, who's like this rangy wing.
No.
I just question whether you've seen any of Darius Bazley. It was a salary tax dump move. That was it.
And they got a guy. They got a guy. Like, it wasn't just, please take this contract because this guy can't play. It's like Saric is like a real player. I don't know how he
if he wanted to come back, he can play along Chet. Like he can play the small ball 5 too. We've seen it. I thought it was a home run for the Thunder, and it was just whatever. They got Kevin Durant, so I'm not going to criticize anything they did the trade deadline, but this had nothing to do. I want to make this clear. This had nothing to do with Darius Bazley from Phoenix's perspective.
No, zero. It's just that's all it was. Yeah, great. Can we just give an A+ to the Thunder? Like as a
they got the highest grade of the deadline, A+++. The final one was the 3-team trade that we need to blow through, but it's Charlotte got Svi Mikhailuk, a 2023 second. It's owned, by the way, via Philly. Philly got Jalen McDaniels, 2 second-round picks, one from Portland in 2024, and then another from Portland in 2029. And then Portland received Matisse Thybulle. Any later impressions from this trade?
Well, I think we've talked about Thybulle already.
We talked about Thybulle on Portland already.
Yeah. I think that's a really good outcome for them. McDaniels is pretty similar to what he was in Charlotte. I still think that was a totally fine upside play, and there's the possibility that McDaniels really does feature for them, in meaningful playoff games at some point this year, or if they decide to keep him around going forward. I don't know if I'd stray too far from like the C+ to the B range for any of these teams, but Thybulle for sure was a good get. I think McDaniels makes a lot of sense too. And this was, not that we really care that much, but this was like a tax avoidance move for the Sixers too. So good for them, I guess, on that one, even if it looks like
I don't want to applaud them ducking the tax, but it doesn't count towards the repeater clock now. Right. And the other thing is I like Jalen McDaniels, and you finished as a net positive in the second round pick department as part of it. Like you got 2 second round picks in addition to the title. I mean, Tybulle's shooting the ball so well in Portland that maybe you look foolish, but it doesn't seem like the opportunity was ever going to be there in Philly for him. And let's see if this sustains.
Yeah, it's not like he didn't get chances, right? There were definitely opportunities for him to prove he could play this well with the Sixers, and it just didn't happen.
Although right now, I guess, is Portland the big winner of this deal right now?
I mean, if not them, who? It has to be, especially if they can keep
the Sixers duck the tax. Throw the confetti.
Stop it. Wait, there's no confetti allowed for tax ducking. It should be, it's not in the budget.
This was very instructive. Do you want to take us out of here?
Yeah. Although so ultimately, I don't think our opinions have changed a whole lot on any of these. And that has mostly to do with the sample and the fact that a lot of these were designed.
Thank you for not saying that at the top of the podcast.
Yeah. You guys can just go read Dan's live grades from a month ago, and you're pretty much going to get the gist of this. Okay. Everybody, thanks for listening. Anybody that had comments and questions, we appreciate it. If you are not already, please follow us on our socials at HardwoodKnocks on Twitter and TikTok, at Hardwood_Knocks on Instagram. Subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you tell your friends and enemies, rate, review, subscribe every place else. And as always, undiscussed yet again, both players that we love to shout out. Shouts to Frank Ntilikina and apologies to Jared Allen.